Most people wander through life under invisible forces they never agreed to. Every choice they make, from the career they chase to the people they surround themselves with, even the way they present themselves, is quietly shaped by pressures they never notice. You believe you're free, but the truth is you're a passenger in a system designed to bend, manipulate, and dictate obedience. Pay close attention, because what I'm about to reveal will expose a reality that almost no one dares to speak aloud. Ignore it, and you remain weak, predictable, and subject to powers you don't even understand. By the end of this, you will understand why society fears the man who walks alone, why isolation can be a weapon, and how to shield your mind from the invisible levers that control everyone else. Most people never recognize how scripted their lives really are. Their thoughts, their emotions, their sense of identity borrowed from collective expectations. Ignorance here is not harmless. It is dangerous. Carl Jung recognized a hidden strength in those who remain apart. The world dismisses them as outcasts, broken, or unfit. But Jung saw something far more unsettling. Human beings who cannot be bent by the pressure of the group. People whose minds are immune to the psychological chains that keep most individuals obedient. And this is not simply controversial. It is a threat to the social structures that govern human interaction. Society fears those who refuse to play by its rules. It forces everyone into shallow alliances, toxic friendships, and constant approval-seeking. The loner steps aside, and that very refusal unsettles the foundations of conformity. Loneliness destroys, solitude empowers. Most confuse the two. The lonely scramble for recognition. The solitary cultivate their own internal authority. One suffers, the other becomes unbreakable. The majority of human behavior is unconscious. What we wear, what we desire, the relationships we maintain, even the way we measure success, all are absorbed from the crowd. The loner discards these programs and crafts a mind that is self-directed. Time spent alone becomes a confrontation with your shadow, the unacknowledged and often denied parts of yourself. Most never meet this side. Loners do, and in facing it, they develop psychological independence. Fear, shame, social ostracism. They no longer command him. Jung himself walked this path, severing ties with Freud, enduring years of isolation, confronting visions and inner forces that could have destroyed him. Yet he emerged more complete, more aware, more powerful. Artists, philosophers, inventors, whistleblowers, many who changed the world did so in isolation, seeing what groupthink blinds others to. Solitude is not a punishment. It is an evolutionary advantage. The man who walks alone observes with a clarity the crowd can never achieve. He notices contradictions, hidden motives, lies people tell themselves. He sees patterns repeating across relationships, workplaces, social networks. While others perform, he deciphers the machinery behind the performance. Once you witness the patterns, you cannot ignore them. Truth becomes a burden. Participation becomes compromise. Isolation becomes strength. Ignore this, and you remain trapped in endless social calculation, drained, manipulated, afraid of your own shadow, afraid of being alone. If you embrace this path, clarity becomes your weapon, freedom becomes your armor, and your mind acts without interference from collective expectations. This is not theory. It is survival. It is dangerous knowledge. And you must pay attention now. Most people believe they choose freely, yet almost every decision is guided by invisible judges. Every career choice, every social alliance, every opinion considered acceptable is pre-programmed. The loner never submits to this code. He grows outside the system. His nervous system learns self-regulation through absence, not applause. When other children needed laughter to feel safe, he felt safe in silence. When teenagers sought constant approval in friendships, he found balance in internal coherence. This produces a kind of power that terrifies those who manipulate through social pressure. an individual who cannot be threatened by exclusion because inclusion was never a currency, one who observes without needing to participate. Jung documented this across dozens of cases. He realized he was studying not illness, but the rare humans who had escaped the invisible prison that holds everyone else captive. The loner becomes a dangerous witness, much like Jung's archetype of the empath. He watches and records human behavior with precision. While the crowd acts, he learns. While others perform, he sees. He notices the man preaching virtue who deceives his family, the friend offering support who undermines you behind closed doors, the colleague smiling in meetings while sabotaging quietly. This is not cynicism. It is pattern recognition, uncorrupted by the need to conform. This vantage point grants access to truths that make participating in ordinary social life impossible. Once you see the mechanics of the game, you cannot unsee them. Once you understand the patterns, ignorance is no longer an option. The knowledge of the loner becomes his isolation. Speaking it threatens the delicate agreements that hold groups together. Every family, workplace, and social circle operates under unspoken contracts of denial. The family pretending the father's drinking doesn't exist, the office ignoring the toxic manager, the friend group accepting the victim who manipulates everyone else. These silent agreements maintain order, but demand participation. The loner who exposes them becomes the problem, not because he is wrong, but because he refuses to comply. Most confuse the loner with the lonely. Jung was obsessed with clarifying this because the misunderstanding creates damage. Loneliness is a deficit, a painful state where connection is desired but denied. Loneliness is suffering from forced absence. The lonely scroll social media, feeling excluded, accept events they dislike, tolerate disrespect, because having bad companionship seems preferable to none. Solitude is the opposite, a superpower, a state where the nervous system finally stops processing the noise of others and can hear its own signal. In solitude, you discover what you genuinely think, not what you've been conditioned to think. You discover what you truly enjoy, not what society says you should. You access preferences, values, and desires unfiltered. The lonely are fragmented by isolation. The solitary are forged by it. Every moment alone is training. Every quiet hour builds immunity to influence. Every unshared thought becomes a brick in the fortress of independence. The loner does not fear the absence of approval. He finds it inside himself. He does not measure himself against the crowd. He measures himself against the truth he uncovers in silence. This is the first stage of psychological sovereignty, the first taste of freedom from invisible chains. It is a state of mind few will ever reach, and those who do, even the most powerful structures, fear. Jung spent years examining this distinction, and what he found upends everything most people assume about isolation. True loners do not experience loneliness the way the rest of the world does. For them, solitude is not emptiness. It is clarity, a sharp relief from the exhausting performance of social expectation. Where the average person feels hollow in silence, the loner feels whole. Where crowds induce anxiety, solitude produces calm. Place a loner in a room full of chatter and forced connection, and he does not feel included. He feels disrupted, like a crystal signal shattered by static. This is not a disorder. It is a different wiring of the nervous system, one that interprets social noise as interference rather than nourishment. Small talk, the currency of ordinary relationships, registers as meaningless echoes. Social rituals that soothe others feel like pointless theater. Pretending to care about trivial topics drains energy instead of creating connection. Jung observed that loners often leave social gatherings depleted rather than energized, not because they are introverted in the conventional sense, but because they process the invisible currents beneath every interaction, reading the gap between words and intent, observing the subtle leakage of genuine feeling behind every mask. This dual perception is exhausting, but necessary. Solitude is not merely preferred. It is essential for their mental recalibration. Jung discovered that these men are often the only ones courageous enough to confront the shadow, the concealed, denied, or projected aspects of themselves. Most of humanity spends a lifetime fleeing this darkness, hiding in groups where blame and judgment can be externalized. In crowds, everyone points outward. There lies weakness, not in me. The group provides a mirror maze of projection, where one can remain blissfully unaware of cruelty by cataloging it in others, ignore dishonesty by labeling others liars, deny insecurity by mocking another's flaws. Loners have no such luxury. When alone, there is no one else to accuse, no distractions from your own inner landscape. Solitude forces confrontation with the raw reality of yourself, your fears, your selfishness, your capacity for harm. Jung realized that those who face this darkness, who integrate their shadow, emerge stronger than those who hide behind collective illusions. Once confronted, the darkness loses its power. Shame, fear of exposure, social threats, they no longer hold sway. You have looked into the abyss and chosen to live with what you see. This acceptance forges a mind impervious to manipulation. Those who integrate their shadow know themselves completely. They recognize their own capacity for cruelty and selfishness. Yet this knowledge does not destroy them. It empowers them. They have embraced the totality of their being, light and dark together. This integration paradoxically renders them less dangerous in a reckless sense, because they can choose consciously, act deliberately, and wield their power with self-awareness. Jung called this state psychological sovereignty. The loner who has faced the full spectrum of his psyche cannot be coerced, shamed, or blackmailed. He knows his capacities, and he has accepted them. Traditional social levers of control fail. No threat of exclusion, no public humiliation, no gossip, no calculated offense can bend him. Jung documented this in his own life. During his deep confrontation with the unconscious, he spent years alone navigating psychological territories that would have destroyed almost anyone. He endured visions that could have been mistaken for madness, emotions that might have shattered another mind, confrontations with truths about himself that contradicted every comforting belief he held. But he did not retreat. He observed, he studied, he integrated, and emerged transformed. No longer fearful of his mind, no longer reliant on external approval, psychologically whole in a way most people never achieve. His discoveries, the shadow, archetypes, individuation, were born from this willingness to walk alone through terrifying inner landscapes. The loner follows the same path. Solitude forces shadow work. Shadow integration produces sovereignty. Sovereignty threatens every system built on control, fear, and social compliance. Here is where Jung's research becomes dangerous to conventional society. A loner who has achieved psychological sovereignty reaches a point where he can make decisions that terrify the collective. He can leave toxic systems without hesitation, expose truths without concern for consequence, act according to personal principles, even when they conflict with the expectations of the crowd. Jung called this moment the snap, not a breakdown, but a piercing clarity, an instantaneous recognition that approval is optional. He can choose freely. He can act in ways others find incomprehensible or threatening. Whistleblowers who sacrifice status to reveal corruption, truth-tellers who risk their reputation to name what everyone knows but dares not speak, individuals who abandon prestigious roles because they contradict personal integrity. These are modern examples. Groups respond with punishment. They exile, ostracize, and scapegoat to maintain their collective illusions. But the loner, sovereign in mind and shadow, cannot be controlled by punishment that relies on social pain. Exclusion is powerless when inclusion was never desired. Shame cannot touch a mind that has confronted its own darkness. Reputation is meaningless when identity was never borrowed from the crowd. The loner is dangerous not because he is malevolent, but because he is free. Freedom is the ultimate threat to systems built on compliance and control. A person who cannot be manipulated, shamed, or coerced is capable of dismantling entire structures simply by refusing to participate. He can reject opportunities everyone else scrambles for, walk away from relationships everyone else tolerates, question assumptions everyone else upholds without fear. Jung spent decades observing this, and he arrived at a conclusion that still unsettles psychologists. The loner is not broken. He is evolved. He embodies what human consciousness becomes when it develops outside the invisible scripts of collective expectation. He does not lack what others have. He accesses what most people never encounter. Most live on autopilot, executing cultural code without inspection. What success should look like, what relationships should be formed, what emotions are permissible, what a life should resemble. The loner refuses the default program. He writes his own operating system, sees beyond the constraints, and operates in a reality the group cannot comprehend. He is free, sovereign, and untouchable by mechanisms that bind the ordinary mind. Every script, every rule, every expectation most people follow operates silently in the background, guiding choices that feel personal but are in truth rehearsed patterns inherited from the collective. Decisions about careers, relationships, even what you allow yourself to desire. These are rarely yours. They are the echoes of 1,000 unconscious agreements, replicated across millions of lives. The loner refuses this programming. He refuses to download the default instructions. He writes his own code, creating a mind that cannot be tamed by ordinary structures, a mind capable of insights and inventions that the conformist crowd cannot even conceive. Unshackled from the invisible chains of consensus, he can see solutions, paths, and opportunities that remain invisible to those invested in maintaining the status quo. Because he does not serve the collective, he can speak, act, and imagine without restraint. Jung found time and again that history's most revolutionary breakthroughs originated with loners, artists who labored in silent studios for years before the world recognized their genius. Scientists who explored questions dismissed as irrelevant, impossible, or foolish by the majority. Philosophers whose ideas were ignored, resisted, or ridiculed. Inventors building radical prototypes alone while society called them insane. The loner is free to perceive patterns and possibilities obscured by groupthink, not constrained by the rules of what is acceptable or normal to imagine. The legacy of the loner is not isolation, it is liberation. Liberation not just for himself, but for anyone who witnesses a man living entirely according to his own mind. Every loner who attains psychological sovereignty proves a vital truth. You can survive outside the collective. You can confront your own shadow, integrate it, and emerge whole. Freedom from unconscious social control is not theoretical. It is attainable, but it demands the price of solitude. Jung understood this because he lived it. His break with Freud left him alienated from colleagues. His ideas were dismissed, mocked, and ridiculed. His explorations into the unconscious were solitary, navigating terrains no one else dared to enter. And yet, it was this isolation that produced some of the most profound insights in human history, concepts that reshaped psychology, spirituality, and philosophy, enduring decades beyond his death. The loner who avoids friends does not reject connection. He protects his consciousness from interference, preserving the clarity necessary to perceive what collective participation hides. He is not failing socially. He is succeeding at the rarest, most difficult form of human achievement, the development of a fully individuated self capable of thinking independently, feeling authentically, and living in alignment with personal truth. The world depends on loners, not because they are inherently superior, but because they see what others cannot. They think what others are programmed to avoid. They ask the questions everyone else is conditioned to ignore. They attempt possibilities that most people are too controlled, too obedient, too fearful to consider. Every system requires outsiders who can step back and question whether the machinery it maintains is still serving its intended purpose, or whether it has become a self-perpetuating cage. If you are someone who keeps no friends, Jung's message is unmistakable. You are not broken. You are not missing something that everyone else possesses. You are accessing a rare dimension of consciousness that most never discover. Your solitude is not a problem to fix. It is a weapon, a protective shield for the mind. Your resistance to conformity is not a flaw. It is immunity to the most subtle, pervasive control system ever created. The discomfort you feel in social settings is not anxiety to be treated. It is a signal, a warning from your nervous system that performing a false self is more destructive than being alone with your true self. The truth Jung revealed is unsettling for society. The loner embodies human potential freed from collective limitations. And freedom, sovereignty, and psychological independence are exactly what every control system fears most. Not because loners wish to dismantle the world, but because their very existence demonstrates that obedience is optional. You can act differently. You can live according to values that the crowd has never examined. You can be psychologically complete without seeking validation from minds too distracted to understand themselves. The loner is dangerous not for malice, but because he is free. And freedom, Jung understood, is contagious. Every person who achieves psychological sovereignty through solitude and shadow integration gives others permission to attempt the same journey. This is why groups punish loners so fiercely, not because they harm anyone, but because their presence exposes the invisible chains holding everyone else captive. In The Alchemist's Path, Perception, Training for Empaths, this principle is applied directly. You learn to transform overwhelm into wisdom, establish boundaries inspired by Jungian insight, and train perception step by step. 3 exclusive chapter videos deepen each lesson, guiding you to master the subtle mechanics of human behavior while protecting your autonomy. The guide, written by Surreal Mind, spans 236 pages, beautifully designed for clarity and focus, ready for immediate download. Start now. Experience deeply while thinking clearly. The loner is not weak. He is evolved. He is a sovereign mind in a world built to demand obedience. And you, if you choose, can take the same path. Your solitude is not a punishment. It is a declaration, a fortress for your consciousness, a laboratory for your shadow, a space where you learn to see clearly, act deliberately, and live freely. Every decision, every thought, every step outside the expectations of the crowd strengthens you. The loner is not alone. He is awake. He is awake to truths that others cannot see, truths that the ordinary mind cannot process without distortion. In stepping outside the group, he steps into power. In embracing solitude, he steps into sovereignty. In facing the shadow, he steps into freedom. This is the path Jung mapped, a path few dare to tread, but one that grants the ultimate prize: unshakable clarity, psychological independence, and the ability to live entirely on your own terms.